Well, hey guys, we've been talking about how the evolution of orchestras and bands kind of came together over the centuries, and what we're headed to is trying to pay attention and identify some of the significant little nuances and happenings around times in history where sound was dramatically impacted by what a lot of people would consider a new sound or a new song, new revelation. Or a new musical emphasis that sort of redefines music and its relationship to culture. And why do we care? Well, because I believe that God has young musicians, singers, poets, writers, and so on out there right now waiting for their aha, nitro, meat glycerin moments in God. So those times where the shifting takes place in our life, where we quit just being the dreamers but the fulfillers of those dreams. And also when we cease to just be contenders for our gifting and contenders for our place in the music world, rather than just being contenders for that, we become actually inheritors of what God's already promised musicians and promised those who love Him and are hard after Him in their heart. And now, but you can look at things that has happened in secular history or in secular culture that were pivotal moments in time. For instance, I think last time we were talking about Haydn and Handel and those guys who were such innovators and they radically brought whole new radical ideas to music. And most all of them you find that was connected to their relationships to nature and creation. And then by the time you get through the 1800s, coming into the early 1900s, then technology, the technologies of the day, somewhat began to take the place and take the interest and take the focus into a whole new place, like through radio, for instance. You know, years ago, there was not even, in the Appalachian culture, you wouldn't even hear guitars in what we would consider today the early days of country music. What we typically consider that, but if you know your music history and you know your musicology, some of the first groups that were like really splashed across the country, they were using guitars, like Jimmy Rogers and Mother Maybelle Carter and the A.P. Carter and the Carter family and all that. Mother Maybelle was playing auto harp and guitar, and so you see the guitar being used there. But remember, that was in the 20s now. There was no guitars actually used in band-type settings as we understand bands today in what would be considered country music or old-time music. Mostly at that point, it was still banjo and fiddle. The guitar became a part of that cultural expression after World War I. And strangely enough, about the same time we all got watches. So there was a lot of technologies and a lot of things that we take for granted that were happening at the time. But then when radio burst onto the scene, that's where you see these the technologies again starting to dominate. Or dominate sounds like an aggressive, negative kind of thing. Actually, radio began to become a part of this big world we want to call music. Because now you could broadcast, like casting seed. That's a farm term. To broadcast is to sow seed. And when they began to sow the seeds of the new sound, it was through the broadcast industry that it happened. You know, when Peer Music sent their song catchers down into the Appalachian Mountains and into around Bristol and Johnson City, Tennessee, and in there you see the Bristol recordings, and that's where Mother Maybelle and the Carter family and the Jimmy Rogers and all these, you know, Vernon Dalhart and fiddling John Carson and Jimmy Thompson and all those people that were going to begin to come out of the woodworks, out of the woods, out of the culture, coming from the porches and the streets of Southern Americana. They're bringing a new sound. Well, they couldn't have done that and redefined music had there not been the technology. Now what's happened through the technologies, and it's been awesome to watch the new discoveries and the new inventions and innovations happen, but at the same time we've lost in many ways the innocence and the simplicity of the poet bards that just walked about carrying the lyric, and some of those because as the bands grew, the orchestra grew, the technologies grew, the commercialization of music grew, it somewhat lost its childhood. It's lost its innocence. Even the topics that were covered in music, it changed, especially by the time you get into the 40s. Suddenly it was drinking and lonesome and divorce and all these things begin to be somewhat exalted. And by the time Hank Williams steps on the scene, who was the first guy to live the rock and roll lifestyle before rock and roll, if you will. All of those were married to the ability to broadcast. And now, as they were doing that, and when you look back from 1919, September 20th, 1919, when Woodrow Wilson, the president at the time, stepped into that arena, and the public address system was used for the first time at the League of Nations. And then that's when all the boundaries, all the harnesses were taken off. Here we go into ages of accelerated discovery and technologies. As it had its impact, you find another huge time in history is by the time you get to Shea Stadium. When the Beatles stepped on the stage at Shea Stadium, 55,000 people are there, and nobody heard the Beatles. The Beatles didn't hear the Beatles. Why? Because the technology had not caught up with the time. The technology had not caught up with the creative expression and the need for it to impact that generation. And what a crazy time that was. There was no monitors on the stage. There was no need for monitors because nobody expected to happen what happened. 55,000 people released a sound, and the Beatles were never heard. The Beatles didn't hear the Beatles. Why? If you look at the footage on what took place that day, 55,000 young people began to release precisely the expressions of the 7 Hebrew words in the Tabernacle of David. If you look at the hands raised, the clapping, the singing, the shouting, the frenzy that took place, every one of those things, you can see them on their knees, you can see them crying out, you can see this explosion of emotion and misdirected worship. And all of a sudden, the sound reinforcement industry was born on whole new levels. They are now creating PA systems and monitor systems and everything. Prior to that, again, there was no need to. But that was the season of the beginning of some sort of breakthrough in the earth, I want to say, because they impacted the whole world and continued to do so. But there was some kind of breakthrough happened right there that began to redefine the technologies, because the techs and the geeks, they had to go after it, man. They had to catch up and keep up with this explosive thing that had happened. And that was just the beginning of one more expression of a generation that was about to find, let's just say, the beginnings of boundless grace and unlimited creativity was about to be starting to be introduced to humanity again. And but hey, we'll talk about this some more. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching. If you've been blessed by this program, please consider partnering with us in prayer or through a financial gift. Learn more by visiting our website at selaministries.com.